I can't stand the smell of pine anymore. It's not just a dislike, it's a physical, suffocating thing. My throat closes up, my palms get slick with sweat, and I feel this cold dread coiling in my stomach. The other day, my girlfriend brought home a new air freshener, some Mountain Meadow bullshit. I didn't even say anything, just picked it up, walked it to the outside trash, and dropped it in. She saw the look on my face and just knew. She doesn't ask anymore. My therapist, yeah, I have a therapist now, what a cliche, calls it an olfactory trigger. Dr. Anya Sharma, a woman with endlessly patient eyes, says it's a classic symptom of CPTSD. She uses these neat, tidy labels: olfactory trigger, hypervigilance, disassociation. It all sounds so manageable on paper. But when you're awake at 3 a.m. because the air from your open window carries a faint scent of evergreen from the park 3 blocks away, it doesn't feel manageable. It feels like you're still there on that ridge with the cold seeping into your bones. It's the quiet, too. You'd think after what happened, I'd hate noise, but it's the silence that guts me. Not just any silence, but that deep, bottomless quiet where the only thing you can hear is the blood pounding in your own ears. It's the silence of expectation. The silence where you're waiting for a twig to snap, for a calm voice to start speaking again from the darkness beside you. It's the silence of the third night. Everyone who hears the story, the short, sanitized version of it, thinks they get it. Wow, man, that's a terrifying survival story. I've learned to just nod along. Yeah, it was crazy, I'll say, and they'll clap me on the shoulder and buy me a beer. They see a hero, I see a fool, they don't understand. The cold, the hunger, the fear of being lost forever. None of that was the real horror. They think the monster was the mountain. They can't wrap their heads around the fact that the monster was the person I trusted more than anyone, my brother. My best friend for 10 years, Miles. And for 3 days on that godforsaken ridge, he was my rock, my leader, the only reason I thought we'd make it out alive, until he wasn't. The most terrifying thing in the world isn't a bear or starvation. It's lying in the dark, shivering, and realizing the person whose breathing is the only other sound for miles. The sound you'd been timing your own to for 2 nights, a subconscious rhythm of reassurance, was just the ticking of a clock. A clock that was counting down to your end. He didn't even raise his voice. That's the part that still messes me up. When he finally told me the truth, he was so calm, so damn calm. It wasn't anger, it was purpose. It all started so perfectly, which is the sickest part, the part my mind obsessively replays in the dead of night. Miles had been planning this trip for months, hyping it with the fervor of a true believer. The ultimate detox, Noah, he'd said, his eyes gleaming with that familiar, intense passion he got for his hobbies, which always seemed to involve pushing limits. No phones, no emails, no noise, just us, the trail and the sky, a baptism in the wild. He was the expert, the seasoned outdoorsman. He was a paramedic, for God's sake. He'd shown me his pack, meticulously organized: first aid, navigation tools, water purification system. I was just the city's soft friend, the writer who spent too much time indoors, and he was my guide, my protector. I trusted him implicitly. The first day was a postcard. We hiked for hours under a brilliant blue sky, the air so crisp it felt like it was scrubbing my lungs clean. We reached a scenic overlook, and Miles, in a moment of grandeur, spread his arms wide. See, this is real life, everything else is just waiting. We joked, we reminisced about college, we felt invincible on top of the world. The trouble started on day 2, and it was so subtle, so insidious, I felt like a frog in a slowly warming pot of water. We were navigating a tricky switchback, and Miles was showing me how to use his prized, expensive military-grade compass. You see, you have to trust the needle, not your eyes, he was saying. Then, in a movement that felt both clumsy and deliberate, it slipped from his hand. It didn't just drop. It bounced once on a rock with a hollow clack, then tumbled end over end down a steep, rocky slope, disappearing into a thicket of thorny bushes so dense it looked like a wall of knives. Damn it, he yelled, but it felt performed, theatrically loud. He scrambled down a few feet, peered into the brush for maybe 30 seconds, and then climbed back up, dusting his hands. Well, that's gone forever. There was no real frustration in his voice, it was a flat statement. An hour later, by a creek, the second shoe dropped. I was filtering water, my back to him. The map, his laminated, waterproof, supposedly indestructible backup, was out. I heard a rustle and a sharp gasp. No, I turned around just in time to see the map, held aloft by a sudden and suspiciously convenient gust of wind, sail out over the fast-moving water. It dipped once, twice, and was gone. Are you kidding me? I shouted, and this time the knot of anxiety in my chest was real and tight, my voice was shrill. Miles, what the hell? First the compass, now the map. He just laughed, a big booming laugh that seemed too loud for the quiet woods. Dude, relax, it's an adventure, this is what we came for. A real challenge, not some paint-by-numbers' hike. He slung an arm around my shoulder, his grip surprisingly firm. Hey, it's me, when have I ever led you astray? Anyone can follow a marked path, we get to make our own. His confidence was a tidal wave, it washed over my panic and left me feeling foolish and small. He was Miles. He knew what he was doing, so when we came to a fork an hour later and he suggested the shortcut, I only hesitated for a moment. The main trail was clearly marked with a faded blue blaze on a tree. It was wide and well-trodden. The path he pointed to was little more than an animal track, overgrown and disappearing into a darker, thicker part of the forest. "This'll shave hours off," he said, his voice brimming with certainty. "Trust me." That night the chill that set in had nothing to do with the temperature. We were lost, I knew it in my bones. The familiar trail markers were gone. As I lay in my sleeping bag, the silence of the woods pressing in, I couldn't stop replaying the events. The compass falling just so. The map flying away on a phantom gust of wind. It wasn't just bad luck, it felt like a script. I'd look over at Miles, already sleeping soundly, his breathing deep and even, his face peaceful in the faint moonlight filtering through the tent, and I'd feel a wave of shame. How could I even think such things? This was my best friend, the guy who dragged me out of a deep depression after my dad died. He was saving us. I pushed the thoughts down, told myself I was just tired and hungry and paranoid, and forced myself to sleep. It was so much easier to believe in a string of impossible coincidences than to face the terrifying alternative that was beginning to take shape in the dark corners of my mind. The third night was a descent into a special kind of hell, the kind where your body and mind start to betray you at the same time. The temperature had plummeted after the sun went down, and a relentless, soaking drizzle that had started in the afternoon had now saturated every layer of my clothing. I was chilled to the marrow. We had run out of food that morning, splitting the last stale protein bar in a grim, silent ceremony that felt like a final communion. Hunger was no longer just an absence of food. It was a physical presence, a dull, gnawing beast in my stomach that made it hard to think straight. My initial anxiety had curdled into a leaden despair. We were lost, truly hopelessly lost. Every direction looked the same, an endless, indifferent, and menacing wall of dark trees and looming shadows. I was starting to give up. I could feel the fight draining out of me, replaced by a cold, fatalistic calm. I imagined just lying down and letting the forest swallow me. We huddled under a rocky overhang that offered minimal shelter, the damp earth seeping into my jeans. I was shivering uncontrollably, a violent, full-body tremor I couldn't stop. My teeth were chattering so loudly I was sure they would crack. "We're not going to make it, are we?" I whispered, the words barely audible over the sound of my own body failing. Miles, who had been sitting perfectly still beside me, staring out into the rain-swept darkness, turned his head slowly. He wasn't shivering. In the gloom, I could see his face was placid, almost serene. It was the most unnatural thing I had ever seen. "It's not about making it, Noah," he said, his voice soft, almost hypnotic, cutting through the noise of the rain and my chattering teeth. "It's about becoming." I had no idea what he meant. My brain, sluggish from cold and hunger, couldn't even begin to decipher his cryptic bullshit, and that's when he did it. He reached for his backpack, the one he'd claimed was nearly empty just hours before when I desperately rummaged through it looking for crumbs, and with a slow, deliberate motion, he peeled back the padded lumbar support. It wasn't just padding, it was a flap held shut by Velcro, a hidden compartment, one I had never seen before despite having handled his pack dozens of times on this and other trips. From it he pulled a vacuum-sealed military-green plastic bag. He laid it on the flat rock between us. The sound of the plastic crinkling was like a gunshot in the oppressive quiet. He slid it open with a small knife. Inside was a brand new, fully stocked survival kit. My eyes, wide with disbelief, scanned the contents. I saw the glint of a flint striker, a tightly wrapped Mylar emergency blanket, a professional-looking first aid pouch. And food, not just one bar, but at least 5 high-calorie energy bars. A thick stick of salami, a bag of beef jerky, and even small packets of electrolyte powder. He laid them out on the rock as if he were arranging a sacred offering on an altar. The cold in my body was instantly vaporized by a hot, surging wave of utter confusion, then white-hot anger. What is that?" I stammered, my voice cracking. "You had that this whole time. We've been starving for a goddamn day and you had that." The injustice of it was so profound it was nauseating. He didn't answer right away. He just picked up one of the bars, unwrapped it with painstaking slowness, the crinkling of the foil an act of torture. He took a bite. The sound of his chewing was obscenely loud, a grotesque symphony of salvation he was denying me. He chewed, swallowed, and then finally looked at me. For the first time in 10 years, I saw that the familiar, brotherly warmth in his eyes was completely, utterly gone. It was like looking at a stranger who was wearing my friend's face. A cold, flat, almost pitying smile touched his lips. Of course, Noah, he said, his voice dripping with a terrifying, gentle patience, as if explaining something to a child. I planned all of this. My mind just short-circuited. It was a blue screen of death. The words were English, but they didn't make a coherent thought. Planned what? I finally managed to croak. Planned to get us lost, to almost starve us to death. Why, for what? To strip away the noise, he said, his gaze becoming more intense, more fervent, his eyes starting to gleam with a manic light. The weakness, our whole lives were coddled, Noah. We're insulated from reality by comfort, by rules, by society. We've forgotten what it means to be truly alive, to be primal. I had to bring you here to the edge. I had to burn away the old you, the soft you, so the real you could be born. This isn't a survival situation, it's a baptism. And the hunger, the colds, they are the holy water. He was talking about it like it was a gift, a twisted, monstrous, insane gift. The casual way he admitted it, the philosophical cult leader bullshit he was spouting to justify it was 1,000 times more terrifying than a simple "I want to kill you." This wasn't malice. This was a mission, this was a ceremony, and I was the sacrifice. His monologue hung in the damp air, more chilling than the rain. My mind was reeling, trying to find a foothold in the landslide of his insanity. This wasn't Miles. This was a monster wearing his skin, speaking with his voice. He took another slow, methodical bite of the energy bar, his eyes never leaving my face, watching for a reaction, savoring my terror. The man you were is weak, Noah, he continued, his voice low and steady. He's afraid of deadlines, of landlords, of what people think. He's a product of a sick system. But the man you are about to become, he will fear nothing but the laws of nature. He will be pure. He finished the bar, licked his fingers clean, and then slowly, deliberately began to rise. The movement was fluid, predatory. I scrambled backwards, my back hitting the cold, wet rock of the overhang. My body was screaming at me to run, but my limbs felt like they were filled with cement. There was nowhere to go but out into the pitch-black, rainy forest. It's time, he said, his voice now a low whisper, almost reverent. The purification is almost complete. All that's left is the final consecration. He took a step towards me, then another. He wasn't rushing. He moved with the unhurried confidence of a predator that knows its prey is cornered. The look in his eyes was the scariest part. It wasn't anger or hatred. It was a kind of ecstatic, holy fervor. He genuinely believed he was saving me. He raised his hands, palms open as if in prayer. "Don't touch me," I managed to choke out, the words pathetic and thin. He smiled that same awful, serene smile. "SHHH. Don't fight it, this is your rebirth." He was right in front of me now, blocking out what little light there was. He knelt down, his face inches from mine. I could smell the sweet, nutty scent of the energy bar on his breath. My heart was a wild drum against my ribs, so loud I thought it would burst. This is it, I thought. This is how I die. Murdered by my best friend in the middle of nowhere for some twisted philosophical fantasy. He reached out, his hand moving with excruciating slowness toward my throat. I flinched, squeezing my eyes shut, bracing for the pressure, for the end. And then a sound, a low alien hum starting faint and growing rapidly louder. It wasn't an animal, it wasn't the wind. It was a mechanical, high-pitched whirring that sliced through the night. Miles froze, his hand hovering an inch from my neck. His head snapped up. Suddenly the world exploded in white light. A blindingly bright beam cut down through the canopy, illuminating our little grotto with the intensity of a stadium light. It washed out all the color, turning the trees into stark, black and white cutouts. We were pinned in the center of it. I blinked, spots dancing in my vision, and looked up. It was a drone. A big, professional-looking quadcopter with a massive searchlight mounted underneath, its rotors beating the wet air. The transformation in Miles was instantaneous and absolute. The serene, prophetic guru vanished. In his place was a creature of pure, undiluted rage. His face contorted into a snarl of frustration, a guttural roar tearing from his throat. No, not now, not yet. He wasn't afraid of being caught. He was furious that his perfect, sacred ritual had been interrupted by a stupid modern machine. The drone hovered, its light unwavering. Miles scrambled to his feet, kicked the carefully arranged survival supplies, sending them scattering into the mud, and gave me one last look of utter contempt. Then, with a final, frustrated curse at the sky, he turned and sprinted away, disappearing into the darkness outside the circle of light like a vampire fleeing the dawn. The drone just hovered there, its light a merciless, artificial sun. For a few seconds after Miles vanished, I didn't move. I just sat there, bathed in its light, blinking. The contrast was so stark. One moment, I was in a primitive, fire-lit nightmare about to be sacrificed by a madman, and the next, I was the subject of a 21st century technological rescue. The whirring of the rotors was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard, Eventually, a voice crackled from a speaker on the drone. "This is County Search and Rescue. Stay where you are. A ground team is approaching your position." The relief was so total, so absolute, that it felt like a physical collapse. All the strength that had been holding my terror-rigid body together just dissolved. I started sobbing, not quiet tears, but huge, ugly, gasping sobs that tore out of my chest. I was alive. I was going to be okay. The rescue team found me huddled on the ground, clutching the mylar blanket Miles had left behind. When they asked me what happened, where my friend was, the story that came out was a garbled, hysterical mess. "He had food," I remember crying. "He had it the whole time. He said it was a baptism." I probably sounded like I was the one who had lost his mind. They gave me water and warm clothes, and their professionalism was a comforting balm on my frayed nerves. They asked about Miles, and I told them which way he ran. They did a sweep of the area but found nothing. He had just melted into the forest. The police interview at the local sheriff's office was even harder. I was sitting there, wrapped in a blanket, sipping hot cocoa that tasted like ash in my mouth, trying to explain to a tired-looking deputy that my best friend, a paramedic, had intentionally lost us in the woods as part of a psychotic spiritual quest. I saw the look on his face. It was a mixture of pity and deep skepticism. He probably thought it was a hiking trip gone wrong, that I was suffering from exposure and trauma, maybe misremembering things. "So you're saying he just ran off?" he asked, his pen hovering over his notepad. They might have dismissed it entirely, written it off as a tragic accident where one friend panicked and fled. But then one of the SAR guys came in. In his hand was a Ziploc bag. Inside was the half-eaten energy bar and the thick salami stick I told them about, which they'd found half buried in the mud where Miles had kicked them. It was proof. It was the small, greasy anchor that kept my story from floating away into the realm of unbelievable fantasy. Leaving that town felt surreal. My girlfriend drove for 3 hours to come get me. As we drove away, back towards the city, back towards my life, I kept looking in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Miles emerge from the trees by the side of the road. I had survived, yes, but the cost was already settling in, a heavy, cold stone in my gut. I had lost more than just a friend on that mountain. I had lost my ability to trust the world, to feel safe in it. The drone had saved my life, but it had also illuminated a terrible truth. The wilderness I was truly afraid of wasn't the one with trees and rocks. It was the one that exists inside people. Edit, wow, okay, I didn't expect this to get so much attention. My phone's been buzzing nonstop. First, thank you, seriously, I'm sitting here in my apartment reading through these comments with a cup of coffee and I don't know. Shaking a little, but in a good way. Just knowing I'm not screaming into a void means more than you can imagine. I feel a little less crazy, so thanks. I want to clear up a few things people are asking. A lot of you are wondering why I didn't see this coming, how a friendship of 10 years could just end like that. The thing is, it didn't. Not really. Looking back now, it's like I'm watching a movie for the second time and seeing all the goddamn foreshadowing I missed on the first viewing. Miles has always been intense. Whatever he got into at 100. A few years ago it was marathon running, then it was Krav Maga. About a year ago it became this extreme survivalist, rewilding philosophy. He started reading these books by guys who live in cabins and write manifestos about the evils of society. He'd go on these long rants about how we're all just sheep in a cage, how we've lost our primal essence. Honestly, I thought it was just another one of his phases, a weird, slightly douchey hobby. When he talked about it, his eyes would get that gleam, but I just tuned it out. It was like listening to a vegan talk about animal cruelty or a CrossFitter talk about their WOD. You just nod and say, wow, that's crazy, man, and wait for the conversation to change. I never ever thought he'd try to make me a convert. I never thought his philosophy included attempted murder as a form of spiritual awakening. He was my best friend. The guy who was the best man at my now-failed wedding. The guy who helped me move 3 times. You just don't believe someone like that is capable of that until they are. Final update. It's been a few months. I wanted to post one last time to close the loop for everyone who followed this story and sent me messages. They found him. About 2 weeks ago, police in a small town in Idaho, over 500 miles from where the hike took place, arrested him for shoplifting. He was trying to steal camping supplies and some books. He looked gaunt and feral in his mugshot, nothing like the friend I knew. When they ran his name, the alert from our county popped up. The Idaho police searched the squalid little room he'd been renting. What they found there, it's the stuff of nightmares. He had journals, dozens of them. They were filled with his handwriting, detailing his philosophy and his plans for me. He had been planning the purification ritual, as he called it, for over a year. He'd picked me specifically because he saw my urban weakness as the ultimate challenge. The journals laid out everything. How he'd fake the loss of the compass and map, how he'd ration the food to induce a state of primal desperation, and the final, horrific details of the consecration. The official diagnosis is severe paranoid schizophrenia with messianic delusions. It wasn't just a weird hobby, he was truly profoundly sick. Knowing this, knowing it was a disease and not just him, should feel better, I guess. A neat clinical explanation. But somehow it feels worse. It feels like the man I knew was just a mask for the madness underneath. It's over. He's in a secure psychiatric facility and he'll likely be there for a very long time. But for me, I know a part of me never made it off that mountain. It's still there in the dark, smelling the pine and the rain, forever waiting for the other shoe to drop.